What's up, meatbags? It's the often imitated, never duplicated Tony TGD. I am here to talk about Eric July's inability to understand how time works, how criticism works, and how just basic storytelling works. Now, you're probably wondering, how did I come to this conclusion? Well, I was on Twitter, like all people. I was on Twitter, just browsing around, and I saw this exchange. It was eye-opening, eye-opening. Now, this whole exchange started when my man here, LL, I don't know who he is. He's just some random guy. He's not really my man, but LL here was saying there was poor writing in ISOM. And Eric July asked, what about the writing is, quote, poor to you? So LL answers real calmly, says, starting the story 2 weeks past. Then sometime earlier than that, the Jasmine plot was confusing. Who's Mrs. Newman and why should we care? It seems that Isom just kicks the shit out of people at a club because he was disrespected. A lot of the dialogue is choppy. Now, you notice there are several things in that criticism. Several. Eric July focuses on one single thing. He doesn't talk about the Isom kicking people in the club, being disrespected, the choppy dialogue, why we should care about Mrs. Newman. The only thing he addresses is the time and that Mrs. Newman we know who she is because we're told who she is. So his response is, what is the issue starting the story in the past? There was never a time earlier than that. It started 2 weeks in the past. Altona tells you who Mrs. Newman is. Isom tells you why he's doing his thing. You read this book. So already, instead of just saying, hey, I hear your criticism. I'll take it in stride. I'll try to improve the book. I'll try to make things a little more clear. That's it. No, he's insulting this guy. He's already saying, hey, you didn't even read the book. You must not have read the book because my book's so great that there's no way you could have any criticism. There's no way you could have any issues with my book. It's so good. It's the greatest book ever. Eric, we are told who Mrs. Newman is in the most basic sense, right? She's a lady that went to church all the time, lived in the neighborhood, and she's Jasmine's mom. That's it. It's literally, we don't know why we should care. Why do we care? Why Avery would disappoint Mrs. Newman? Why Altona is invoking the name of Mrs. Newman, right? Maybe if you said, hey, Mrs. Newman raised us while mama was out there trying to make a living because daddy died in the war or something, that you get that there's a sense that there's an actual connection between Mrs. Newman and Altona and Avery, other than some lady that went to church and never missed. That's it. That's literally her character. And Isom never tells us why he's doing this thing, other than, yeah, Altona said Mama be mad at me if I didn't. Mama be mad if I didn't go get Jasmine, so yeah, I better go do that. Also, he's disrespected, right? Eric didn't even address the disrespecting, but it gets better. It's because you see, LL, he's not giving up. LL, he says, that's a lie, Eric. Look at this. It says earlier, after the 2 weeks ago line. I'm fucking pointing at it. Yeah, I read it. So he has the book. He owns the book, a physical copy. He's not even, I read it in a PDF. I read an illegal pirated copy. He has the actual copy, and he's pointing to it right there. It says earlier, Shadow Valley, outskirts of Flores Park. Eric July says, my friend, it's earlier in the current day, not earlier than 2 weeks. Ha ha. Eric, you fucking idiot. Nowhere did we ever establish what the current day is. We start the book off 2 weeks ago. That is your time anchor. That's the first time frame, the first reference to what time the book is taking place at. Now, if you mean this is earlier than the day that we're shown from 2 weeks ago, then yes, you're correct. It's earlier that day, which is earlier than 2 weeks ago. See, 2 weeks ago is a time. Earlier is a time previous to the 2 weeks ago, right? So you got 2 weeks ago. It doesn't say 2 weeks ago, 7 o'clock, and then earlier would be earlier than 7 o'clock. It's just a general 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago. We've never established what now is. Is 2 weeks ago February? Is 2 weeks ago January? Are we currently sitting in March, and then 2 weeks ago is the beginning of March, and this is the end of March? We don't know because you never tell us. You never establish what the now is, Eric. Between ISOM 1 and ISOM 2, there is no now. What you should have did is just start the book. You don't need to start it 2 weeks ago because you never went to now. If earlier is supposed to be the now, then you should have just put now, current day, right? You didn't need earlier. If you were going to establish that the scene with the cops, being all freaky about her coming back, the mysterious her, if that was 2 weeks ago, and you put 2 weeks ago, you do the little scene, and then this should have just said now, current day, or just put a date, right? So we can establish that it's not 2 weeks ago. We've moved past the 2 weeks ago, right? Or if this is earlier in that day from 2 weeks ago, right? If this is earlier in the 2 weeks ago day, which I suspect is what you mean, right? Because you're a semantic just fucking whore, right? So this earlier is supposed to be earlier in that day that we saw from 2 weeks ago, which is still technically earlier than 2 weeks ago. Then you shouldn't have even started 2 weeks ago. You should have just started the story. This is not like the 5th, 6th, 7th book in the universe. This isn't a flashback to some other story. Like, hey, we got to establish this is earlier. This is 2 weeks ago because some other book that we put out already had a major event, right? So if this was taking place in, say, the DC universe and Earth blew up, right? And you guys say, oh shit, this story takes place on Earth, but Earth blew up in the current now of DC. So I got to start this story 2 weeks ago to let people know that we're on Earth prior to the Earth blowing up in that issue of Superman or something, right? But there is no other comic books. You literally started your universe 2 weeks ago for no fucking reason. Simply start now. You didn't need the 2 weeks ago. If this isn't current day, if this is earlier than the 2 weeks ago, you just start. You don't need to say 2 weeks ago and then earlier that day of 2 weeks ago. It is retarded. This is why people complain and say the storytelling is weak. This is why people say the writing is weak, Eric. Sometimes what you think, what you mean, and what you write on the page don't line up. It might sound smart in your head. It might sound clever when you tell it to your yes men. But when you put it on the paper, it makes you look retarded. Okay? And arguing with your fans instead of just saying, hey, I could have made it more clear. And this is when people say you can't take criticism, right? Because instead of arguing, instead of being a Marvel milkshake squad member, right? Instead of arguing with people, instead of being one of those types, an SJW, is to argue with people online who are criticizing your creation. You simply could have said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I could have made that clear. Sorry for any confusion. That's earlier that same day, 2 weeks ago. That's it. This guy wouldn't be mad. You wouldn't have lost a customer. You wouldn't have pissed off other people who are reading this. Yeah, sure, your diehards, your ride or dies, your Bruces, your Sturgises, your LGs, they're gonna pat you on the back and say, good job, Eric. You put that hater in his place. You made him all embarrassed on Twitter. You got all of us liking your tweet. You ratioed him. Good job. But actual normal people who see this shit are gonna go, wow, Eric July is an SJW. Eric July can't take criticism. Eric July cannot handle simply being wrong about things that he did, right? And again, this is no big deal. This is something that no one should even be upset about. You should say, hey, you know what? Yeah, when I wrote it down, it looked good. But now that I'm seeing it, now that I'm reading it and seeing how other people are looking at it, maybe you're right. Maybe I could have made it more clear that that's earlier that day 2 weeks ago. Or maybe I didn't even need to put 2 weeks ago. Maybe I should have just started the story since it does start from 2 weeks ago, right? Again, it's really weird. And I suspect ISOM 3 is going to have a time jump. ISOM 3 must have a time jump where it's like, oh, now it's now. And all that shit in from 1 and 2 happened 2 weeks ago. And it's not important to the story. If not, this is all dumb, Eric. And you fucked up. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments. Am I wrong? Is Eric wrong? Is he an idiot? I don't know. As always, love, peace, booty grease. I'm out this bitch.